You left this property at 7:23 p.m. last night. That is a direct violation of the Cedarbrook Commons emergency curfew, and I am issuing you a $1,000 fine effective this morning. You're fining me $1,000 for leaving my own house. I am fining you for violating a board-mandated curfew that exists to protect this community while a theft investigation is ongoing. And I suggest HOA President Victoria Shaw showed up at the front door of 22 Sycamore Bend and handed the homeowner a $1,000 fine for leaving his property at 7:23 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, a violation of the emergency community curfew she had imposed across the entire Cedarbrook Commons subdivision after her son's bicycle went missing from their front yard, and told him that every subsequent violation would double the fine until he demonstrated full compliance with board authority. She said the words "full compliance with board authority" about a grown man leaving his own home after dark. What she did not know was that the homeowner had already been documenting her surveillance of his property for 3 weeks. That the police investigation she had triggered by filing a theft report was about to reveal that her son's bicycle had been sitting at a friend's house the entire time. And that the harassment lawsuit being prepared against her was going to become the most embarrassing case the Fort Bend County Courthouse processed all year. Lester Samuels, 36, a project manager for a commercial construction firm based out of Houston, had lived at 22 Sycamore Bend in the Cedarbrook Commons subdivision of Sugar Land, Texas, for 3 years. Cedarbrook Commons sat in Fort Bend County, a middle-class neighborhood of brickfront homes, tree-lined streets, and the kind of community where people generally minded their own business and kept reasonable hours. Lester had bought his home after years of apartment living and had renovated his back patio the summer before. New decking, outdoor lighting, a grill he used every weekend. He was organized, level-headed, and had never once received a legitimate complaint from anyone on Sycamore Bend. He was checking his mail on a Wednesday afternoon when he found the emergency notice in his mailbox. It was printed on official Cedarbrook Commons HOA letterhead and signed by Victoria Shaw in her capacity as board president. It declared that, effective immediately, all residents were prohibited from leaving their properties between the hours of 7:00 p.m. and 6:00 a.m. until further notice, citing an ongoing community safety concern related to the theft of personal property within the subdivision. The notice did not specify what property had actually been stolen. A neighbor 2 doors down told Lester later that afternoon that Victoria's son's bicycle had gone missing from their front yard the previous evening. Victoria Shaw, 52, had been HOA president of Cedarbrook Commons for 6 years and had spent most of that time operating at the outer edge of whatever authority the bylaws technically granted her. She was the kind of board president who sent violation notices for things other HOAs had never even thought to regulate, and who treated every community matter as a personal affront requiring her direct intervention. The bicycle had belonged to her 12-year-old son and had been left unlocked on their front lawn overnight. And Victoria had decided within hours of discovering it missing that the appropriate response was to impose a curfew on every adult homeowner in the subdivision. Lester read the notice twice. Then he folded it, put it in his kitchen drawer, and walked out of his front door at 7:15 p.m. to pick up dinner from a restaurant on Highway 6. He was back by 8:30. Nobody stopped him. Nobody said anything. He assumed the whole thing would blow over by the weekend. It did not blow over. Before we go any further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. We genuinely love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. And if you believe that no HOA president has the right to impose a curfew on grown adults over a missing bicycle, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button and join us right here on HOA Unhinged. The $1,000 fine notice arrived in Lester's mailbox the following Thursday morning. It cited his departure from 22 Sycamore Bend at 7:23 p.m. on Tuesday as a direct violation of the Cedarbrook Commons emergency curfew, and stated that continued noncompliance would result in doubled fines for each subsequent violation. Lester photographed the notice, pulled up the Cedarbrook Commons governing documents from the Fort Bend County Clerk's website, and spent an entire evening going through every page. There was no provision anywhere in the document granting the board the authority to impose movement restrictions on homeowners. Not a clause, not a footnote, not a single sentence. The curfew was every bit as legally groundless as the bicycle theft that had inspired it. He sent a formal written response to the HOA board the following week, stating that the curfew had no basis in the governing documents, and that he would not be paying the fine or modifying his behavior. Because of it, he kept his tone professional and his language precise. Then he walked out of his front door at 7:30 p.m. on a Friday evening to visit a friend 3 streets over and came home at 10 p.m. Without incident, the second fine arrived 2 days later, $2,000 this time, exactly as Victoria had promised it would double. Lester added it to the folder. Victoria began appearing on Sycamore Bend in the evenings with increasing frequency after that. Lester first noticed her walking slowly past his property at around 7:15 p.m. On a Monday, clipboard in hand, moving at the pace of someone taking notes rather than taking a walk. He saw her again the following Wednesday, parked in a car at the end of the block, facing his house for 40 minutes before driving away. By the end of the second week, he had documented 6 separate incidents of Victoria watching his property from the street, from her car, and once from the sidewalk directly in front of his driveway. Then the accusations began. Victoria knocked on his door on a Saturday morning and told him directly that she believed he was responsible for the theft of her son's bicycle. She said she had been observing his patterns and that his behavior since the curfew was announced had been suspicious. Lester asked her what specifically she considered suspicious. She told him his refusal to comply with the curfew was itself evidence that he had something to hide. Lester told her that refusing to comply with an illegal curfew was evidence of nothing except a clear understanding of property rights, and closed the door. The third fine arrived that week, $4,000, and Victoria had begun referencing foreclosure proceedings in her most recent correspondence. Other residents on Sycamore Bend had quietly stopped leaving their homes after 7:00 p.m. rather than deal with the fines and the confrontations. 2 neighbors told Lester privately that they agreed with him but were not willing to fight it. He told them they did not have to. He would handle it himself. Lester called a property rights attorney in Houston named Patricia Owie that week and brought the full folder, every fine, every notice, and the documented surveillance log he had been keeping since Victoria first appeared outside his property. Patricia reviewed everything over the weekend and called him Monday morning. She told him the curfew was an illegal abuse of HOA authority, the fines were unenforceable, and the surveillance he had documented crossed into stalking territory under Texas Penal Code 42.072. She asked him if he had cameras on his property. He told her he had 3. She told him to make sure they were running at all times and to document every incident going forward without exception. He added a 4th camera the following day. The break in the case came from the most unexpected direction, and it came fast. A parent 2 streets over from Sycamore Bend called the Fort Bend County non-emergency line on a Thursday afternoon to report that she had found a bicycle in her garage that did not belong to her family. Her son had borrowed it from a friend 3 weeks earlier and had forgotten to mention it to anyone. The bicycle was a blue and silver mountain bike with a custom handlebar grip. It matched the description Victoria had given in her original theft report exactly. The same officers who had taken Victoria's theft report drove to her house on Sycamore Bend that evening to inform her that the bicycle had been located and that no theft had ever occurred. Victoria received the news at her front door. The officers noted in their report that she did not appear particularly relieved. Lester's attorney, Patricia Owe, received a call from him within an hour of the news reaching the neighborhood. He had heard it from a neighbor who had heard it from someone on the street where the bike was found. Patricia told him to stay calm and let her handle the next steps. She already had everything she needed. The following morning, Patricia filed a formal complaint with the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office documenting Victoria's stalking behavior under Texas Penal Code 42.072. A charge that requires a pattern of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable individual to feel harassed or threatened. Lester's documented surveillance log covered 19 separate incidents over 4 weeks. The 4 cameras on his property had captured 11 of them on video with clear timestamps. The DA's office reviewed the complaint and opened a criminal investigation that same week. Patricia also filed the civil lawsuit in Fort Bend County District Court that same morning, naming Victoria personally and the Cedar Brook Commons HOA board collectively. The filing cited the illegal curfew, the unenforceable fines, the documented stalking, and the defamatory accusation Victoria had made directly to Lester's face, connecting him to a theft that had never even occurred. Attached to the filing as Exhibit A was the Fort Bend County Police report confirming the bicycle had never been stolen at all. Victoria Shaw received her copy of the lawsuit on a Friday afternoon. Her attorney called Patricia's office before the end of the business day. The Fort Bend County District Court ruled in Lester's favor on every single count. The emergency curfew was declared an illegal and unauthorized exercise of HOA authority, with no basis whatsoever in the Cedar Brook Commons governing documents. Every fine Victoria had issued under it, totaling $7,000 against Lester's deed alone, was dismissed in full and declared permanently unenforceable. The court found that the pattern of surveillance Victoria had conducted against Lester met the legal threshold for stalking under Texas Penal Code 42.072 and entered that finding into the public record of Fort Bend County District Court, where it would remain attached to her name indefinitely. The defamation claim was addressed separately, and it landed hard. Victoria had accused Lester directly, and by name of stealing a bicycle that had never been stolen. A false statement of fact she had made without evidence, and repeated to multiple neighbors on Sycamore Bend over a 3-week period. The court awarded Lester damages on the defamation count that reflected both the reputational harm of the accusation and the deliberate nature of the campaign she had waged against him while knowing she had no evidence to support it. The criminal stalking investigation, opened by the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office, concluded 4 months after the civil judgment. Victoria was charged under Texas Penal Code 42.072 and entered a guilty plea to avoid trial. She was sentenced to 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, and was issued a formal restraining order prohibiting her from approaching Lester's property or communicating with him in any form. The Cedar Brook Commons HOA board had removed Victoria from the presidency the week the lawsuit was filed, and had commissioned a full audit of every enforcement action she had taken during her 6-year tenure. The audit found 9 other residents who had received fines under policies Victoria had invented without any board authorization. Several of them filed their own legal actions in the months that followed, using Patricia Owe's filing as a foundation. Victoria Shaw listed her home on Sycamore Bend for sale 7 months after the criminal plea was entered. She left Cedar Brook Commons on a quiet morning without saying goodbye to anyone on the street. Lester Samuels walked out of his front door at 7:15 p.m. on the evening after the judgment was handed down and went to pick up dinner from the same restaurant on Highway 6 he had visited the night all of this started. He was back by 8:30. Nobody was watching from the street. Nobody filed anything. The neighborhood was exactly as quiet as it should have been all along. If this story reminded you that a curfew is not something any HOA president can impose on grown adults over a missing bicycle that was never actually missing. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of what HOA authority actually looks like when it is used properly. And if you have a story about an HOA president who turned a personal problem into everyone else's punishment, drop it in the comments. We read every single one. See you on the next one, right here on HOA Unhinged.